Hello, Westview Baptist. It's good to be with you again. It's Pastor Phil, and this is the second week of us meeting remotely as we navigate our way through this COVID-19 situation, both here in Canada and around the world. Um, I was reminded this week that while we may have canceled activities and Sunday morning worship at Westview, we have not canceled church, and that's sometimes a phrase we throw around. You can't cancel church. We are the church, and we continue to be the church. It doesn't matter where we are, what we're doing. We are God's people, and we are following Jesus Christ now as ever. So, a reminder, we have not canceled who we are. We continue to be who God has asked of us, and while we may be doing it in new and creative ways, here we are, the church. You have probably received communication from us either by email, letter, or phone, and we are working very hard as leadership at the church to stay connected with you. We're going to continue to do that. Look forward, middle of the week this week, to an email announcement just to fill you in on what's been going on in the life of our community. And we just want to stay connected as we continue to move forward. Also, to let you know that for folks who do not have a computer, if you know someone in our church community who doesn't, we are intentionally trying to make phone contact with them. So if somebody isn't getting those phone calls, let us know. We'll try to make sure that they get included. Also, a reminder that expenses continue as we go through this. And so we want to find ways to help you to continue to give your tithes, your gifts, your offerings. It may be as simple as putting your offering in your offering envelope, put it in another envelope and mail it to the church, or drop it through the mail slot at the church. Or you can set up pre-authorized payment, an e-transfer, or you can go to our website and go to the very bottom of the page. There's a button you can click, which will take you to Canada Helps, and you can give there. If you have questions about any of this, call or email the church office, and we'll get you connected with someone who can help you. But we are going to continue to worship. And this is how we're worshiping today. I'm glad that you've gathered with me to be able to be a part of this. Over the last few weeks, as we've gone through this season of Lent, we have been looking at parables of Jesus in the Gospel of Luke. Because as Luke records the life of Jesus, he makes a point of saying that at one particular time, Jesus started going resolutely toward Jerusalem. He was heading toward Jerusalem knowing that when he arrived, he would be executed. And you would think that along the way he might play it safe, stay under the radar, but exactly the opposite. Jesus continued to teach and to challenge, and he told stories. We call them parables, but they're teaching stories with a point. And they were dangerous because they were stories where he was telling people what they needed to hear, not just what they wanted to hear. And so oftentimes it angered people, but he told them anyway. So as he's heading toward the cross, he's telling these challenging stories that's making people in some cases quite angry. But he continues to do that because he was called to speak the truth and called to do so with grace. The passage I want to focus on today is in Luke 16, verses 1 to 9. And it's a bit of a strange story. It's troubled times in one man's life and how he responded to that. But just listen to this. Jesus told his disciples there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, "What is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management because you cannot be manager any longer." The manager said to himself, "What will I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do, so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses." So he called in each of his master's debtors. He asked the first, "How much do you owe my master?" 900 gallons of olive oil, he replied. The manager told him, "Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 450. Then he asked the second, "How much do you owe?" 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, "Take your bill and make it 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Now, first of all, this is a strange sounding story. And I have to say right off the bat, Jesus is not setting up a business model here. He's not promoting embezzling of funds or mismanaging of finances in any organization. He's also not telling us to create false friendships that are just based on payment of money. He's using this shocking story to get people's attention and to make a point. So, what is he doing? Well, we might be tempted to think of the saying that we often throw around: you don't know how much you've got till it's gone. And it is a little bit like that. This guy has a good job, well paying, probably had some prestige and power in the community. And then all of a sudden, he loses his job. We don't know if he actually was mismanaging things, but he's been accused of it and he loses his job. But in a society where you would expect that somebody would fall back on their family and their relationships, because that's what the social network was back then, this guy doesn't even mention it. He says he's not strong enough to dig, and he's too proud to beg for money. So he comes up with another creative solution. And I think the fact that he's driven to this really highlights that it's not you realize how much you had until you don't realize how much you had until it's gone. Really, in this case, in this story, what we find out is that you don't know how little you have until the little you thought you had is gone. Um, this guy thinks he has it all, but that's taken away, and he realizes that at the end he doesn't even have relationships he can fall back on. And I think we're in a time right now where we're realizing that things we thought we would always have aren't there. You go into the store, you expect to see all sorts of things on the shelves, and they're not. A lot of things that we think we should be able to just run out at the last minute and pick up are sold out. We're expecting usually to be able to go into the hospital, visit people, or go into the hospital because something's gone wrong and get attention. And these days, that's not a guarantee. Hospitals are discouraging visitors or asking visitors not even to come. And in some cases, they're really urging people to stay home for minor health situations. So things we thought we had, we aren't able to count on the same way. It's a whole different world we're living in. And I think it's true in the church as well. In the church world, often as long as we've got Sunday morning worship, we've got offerings coming in, we've got volunteers helping out, we've got midweek programs that people are showing up to, and we feel like everything is good. It's all working along well. But at a time like this, you take those things away, you strip away the programs and the activities. What are we left with? Jesus actually gives a pretty strong indictment here. In verse 8, he says that the master commends the dishonest manager, doesn't give him his job back, but he commends him. And he commended him because he acted shrewdly. He used his mind. He was cunning in the way that he acted. And then Jesus goes on and says, "For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light." And often in the church, we're good at feeling like everything is okay as long as it's all familiar and comfortable. But there may not actually be any depth. And Jesus is really talking a lot about relationships here. What kind of depth of relationship do we have? Well, you notice if there's an absence of it, when suddenly you can't meet face to face. Who is going to call? Who am I going to call? Who's there to lean on, whether I need something or just somebody to talk to? I think the situation we're in right now highlights where the poverty might actually lie, even within our churches. I think there's another question we can ask, and that is, how sad is the community around us that our activities aren't happening? Does anybody miss us? Does it matter to our community that Westview Baptist Church isn't actively engaging in the kinds of ministries we were before? I suspect that there are a lot of people, the vast majority of our immediate community, don't even really notice. And that says a lot about us, what it is that we're investing in our relationships. And Jesus is saying, listen, the people of the light, people who are my followers, people who claim to be God's people, need to be much better at investing in those relationships, both within the community, but also in the wider community as well, outside of the church, outside of the community of faith. You know, a few years ago, our family visited the East Coast and one of the places we went to see was the Fortress of Louisbourg, an amazing place. But the real gem for me there was off in a back alley. There was a small building with a museum dedicated to a small group of nuns who had lived in the fortress in its early days. They weren't there at the very beginning, but as I read through the material, what I found out was that prior to the arrival of this order of nuns, uh, it was a wild place. Crime was rampant. You weren't safe walking through the streets, and there was a lot of need in the community. After this group of dedicated nuns arrived, people who loved Jesus and wanted to serve people on his behalf, there were incredible things that happened. They started educating people, but they would educate not just those who could pay them, but those who had no money. So you had the impoverished of the community getting an education. They set an example of living a life like Jesus, and it changed the way people looked at themselves, and actually attendance at worship went up. Crime went down, and during times of real crisis, these nuns were the ones on the front lines, caring for the wounded, caring for the sick. They left an impression on the community, and it changed the community. You know, I think we should be the kind of people who change the community we're in. Again, Jesus isn't talking about us misusing money. He's not talking about shallow relationships. He's just saying, where are you investing your resources? Are you as an individual investing your resources all in yourself? And we've seen a lot of that lately with hoarding and crisis shopping, panic shopping. Or are you taking your resources and finding ways to bless and care for people around you? Because that's actually long term, that's actually eternal thinking. In verse 9, Jesus said, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Now, what he's not saying there is that you can buy your way into heaven. He's also not saying that you can do a lot of good things and that will earn your way into heaven. But what he is saying is that somebody who is following him, someone who has given their life into Jesus' hands and is wanting to live for him, is going to have a whole change of perspective. You know, the shrewd manager had a change of perspective. He realized how impoverished he really was and realized he needed to invest in relationships that would last the long run. And we need to be thinking that way as well, not just investing in ourselves, not just protecting and caring for ourselves, but investing in relationships around us. Yeah, there's monetary ways of doing it. There's also time and energy, care and attention that we can give to people around us, and it makes a difference. When we do that, we're actually investing in relationships that will pay off for eternity because we will be living as Christ to them. There are people who notice when they're cared for in a way that's unlike the rest of the world caring for them. And people ask questions. They want to know why that is. Well, for me, for anyone who's a follower of Jesus, the answer is, well, that's what Jesus did for me. That's what I want to do for you. And it's a chance for us to introduce people to Jesus. Where are you investing your resources? Are you investing them in just yourself, or are you investing them beyond yourself into relationships and people, not just inside the church community, but outside? But of course, we want both to be healthy. I said before, we're trying to make sure that we connect well within our church. That's part of investing in the relationships inside, making sure no one falls between the cracks. But there's a whole world out there that needs to know the love of Jesus Christ. Let's take our resources, let's take what has been given to us by God and invest it in the relationships that He wants us to build all around us. God bless you. We'll talk again soon.